Okay, great. Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We call this Tales from the Void. The Void is the Verica Open Incident Database, and the kind of the finding, or one of the things we're going to talk about most of the time here, is MTTR isn't what you think it is. And so I really thought this would be a great talk to bring over to the security community. We just released the Void, which is a report that we've been working on, but we just released it last month. We've had a lot of SREs and availability type folks that have been really interested in it. But I find the overlap to security to be especially compelling. I've had some conversations with security folks that just are really excited about what the kind of stuff that we're finding out of these incidents. I think it gets back to the whole like a bug is a bug is a bug, and outage is an incident, and there's just a lot of connection between the two communities more than we think about. And so today we're going to kind of go through that. Courtney, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm trying to drive slides. And of course, I had that like realization of, I'm not in full presenter view. So enjoy the glory of my tabs, everyone. Um, Hi, I'm Courtney Nash. I'm a research analyst at Verica. And I have a background in cognitive science, human factors. And so I'm researching complex systems and particularly how they fall down. So we started the Void last year as a way to give people a consolidated resource of all the incident reports that are out there in the world that folks are writing. So I'll let James talk a little bit about that, and then I will dive into the methodology for that after that. So bear
That's
with
great.
me while I keep my windows keep switching on me. I'll let James talk a little bit about what it is.
I have a tab problem myself, Courtney. It's always third tab to the right. That's
Yeah.
it's like
Okay.
where am I? So James Wickett on Twitter at Wickett. Hit us up if you have any questions about this. If you're interested in it, we have some links at the end, kind of if you want to get involved more with the Void project. But the Verica Open Incident Database takes public software-related incidents and outages, mostly not security at this point, but TBD on where we're going in the future, raising awareness and increasing understanding of how these complex systems fail that we love and we care and we tend to. And we want to make the internet a more resilient and safe place. You can find out more about it at the void.community. We started this project. The genesis of it was Verica, the company we both work for, is a continuous verification company, which is kind of same lineage of the chaos engineering tools of the past, where we're helping find safety margin for systems, working with like first class SRE and DevOps teams with that. So we started doing all this research, pulling in all these incidents and outages and how systems fail. And then we realized this would be really good to share with everybody else. And then Courtney has been able to do a lot of analysis on this, and that's where we ended up with the Void report, which we just got released. I think I mentioned that earlier last month. And so, Courtney, you want to kind of tell us about like how you got these incidents and kind of some of the findings that you found through it.
Yeah, so these are all public reports that either a company has written, so things like postmortems and blog posts, or even just status pages. But because we wanted to take a broader look at not just how the software industry handles incidents and thinks about them, but sort of how the world thinks about these things, we included other things like media articles, social media, the full gamut of anyone talking about when a software incident or outage happens. And so we've pulled all of those into a database. I sort of just mentioned this primary and secondary. So whether the organization wrote it, or whether it was written about that organization by someone else externally. And then we collect a whole bunch of metadata on top of that. So things like the date of the incident, the duration of it, if it's either explicitly mentioned in the report, or if we can, you can get those kinds of things fairly easily from status pages, the impact of the incident, things that might have been involved. If it's a really nice detailed incident report, you might tell us that your Kubernetes clusters fell over or what have you. So we collect a whole bunch of metadata on top of these publicly available reports. And then we started looking at it. Honestly, didn't really know what to expect or what we were going to find. And we started with the duration data because we think that's something that people are obviously very curious about. How long does it take you to resolve these things is a topic that is probably discussed in almost every single, sort of SRE or security team. And I was a little bit surprised. We were surprised to find that, honestly, y'all are pretty good at what you do. That's not surprising. The majority of the incidents that have duration data in the void are resolved in about under 2 hours. And we really took this finding to mean that the expertise that you all as operators, as experts in those systems bring to bear works more often than not. You understand as much as is possible about sort of the boundaries of your system, where the scary spots are, where the problem issues might be, and you're able to remediate those things generally actually pretty quickly. And we found one other interesting thing though about the duration data, and this reflects some research from another engineer at Google, because we wanted to look at the duration of those data. And this is sort of just some statistical wonkery. But if you're going to start talking about things like mean time to resolve, you really need to look at the distribution of your data. And I don't know how many people are sort of used to looking at these things this way. This is a histogram of all the duration data from all the companies in the void. So you basically count up how many are resolved in an hour, how many are resolved in 2 hours. So you get this bin of these, and then you can chart that, over that time. And this is where we first saw, oh, well, most of them are actually resolved in under 2 hours. That's that number that I just mentioned earlier is sort of very obvious because there's this huge skew to the left of the data. And that skew is what's really important, because it means this isn't actually a normal distribution of data. The fact that things do resolve quickly and then fall off, and then you have this long tail of potentially more scary and traumatic things, means that you don't have that nice bell curve normal distribution that we're probably all used to having seen time and time again. And what that means is, statistically speaking, things like what are called central tendency measures, like your mean, even your median or your mode, aren't good indicators of those data. So if you're trying to talk about the performance of your teams and your systems, and you're using mean time to resolve, you're not actually, I don't want to say you're wrong, but you're not right. You don't know is the problem. There's the variance of those data means that something like a mean time to resolve is ultimately kind of an unreliable or at least misleading metric. I wanted to show just a small sample of some of the Google data that we collected. You see roughly the same pattern, right? Where you see it's highly skewed to the left, and then it draws off, and then there's a few things, that take longer. If you look at the mean of those data, it's like almost 6 hours. Now, some of you might say, hey, outliers, in a data set, but if you kick those out, you look at the median, that's going to be better. And it does look like the median is more representative potentially, right? But here's where things get really interesting. So I alluded to an engineer from Google. His name's Stepan Davidovich, and he did this incredible bit of research. And this is the report. If you want to go look for it, it's called Incident Metrics in SRE. And he took the notion that non-normal distributions aren't well represented by measures of central tendency, as we just talked about, and showed experimentally that you can't reliably detect changes in MTTR, in incident outage duration data. Unfortunately, we don't have time to really get into all of his work. I highly recommend that you go and look at it. We also walk through it in the Void report. But the TLDR is essentially that he ran a bunch of Monte Carlo simulations, which are, like, for lack of a better term, sort of like A/B tests on a set of data you've already collected, right, or created, versus like A/B testing production, data against each other. And he had a bunch of different sort of experimental test cases. In some cases, he took half of the data for a given company and he improved the MTTR by X%. And in some cases, he made it worse. And in another case, he didn't touch it at all. And in the end, what he found was you can't reliably detect a difference in MTTR because of the nature of how those data are distributed. We really found that was a really fascinating outcome, and that our data show the same distribution led us to conclude that on a broader scale across lots more organizations, we're still seeing that same pattern. So if you're panicking, don't panic. It's okay. I know that many people probably rely on this metric, and you're like, oh, now, what are we going to do? So in the report, we talk quite a bit more about other things that you can do. Essentially, if you really need to hang on to some actual concrete metrics, things like SLOs are really useful. If your organization already has those, then you can look at the impacts of incidents on those. One other thing that I talk about is cost of coordination metrics, which comes from a researcher who's now at a company called Jelly, Dr. Laura McGuire. And that's looking at like how many people get involved in your incidents. Because that really talks a lot more about sort of the toil and the stress on your internal teams, which is a very important factor to consider. And I'm sure from a security standpoint, I think it's even more stressful sometimes for y'all than it is for, availability types of incidents. So more details on that in the report. Don't panic. I'm going to talk about one other quick thing here towards the end too. I just wanted to highlight at least a couple more of the results from the report. These are not, we won't give you the full details, but that at least gives you a flavor of what else is in there. So one of the other things that we looked at is whether or not people are effectively looking for a root cause of the incident. This tends to be what people consider a standard industry practice, same as MTTR. Also, like MTTR, I think it gives you a false sense of certainty and confidence about what's happening. But before I get into that at all, I was actually really surprised by this outcome. Now, the data are still really preliminary because we don't have nearly the full set of incident reports out there in the world in the void yet. But only about a quarter of the incident reports either said, we found the root cause, it was this, or perhaps even had a more formal sort of root cause analysis. Both Google and Microsoft are very explicit about using what we call RCA. So I was surprised. I expected this to be bigger, considering that I think it's perceived at least as an industry practice. For us, we wanted to look at this at least as a baseline to see whether it changes or not over time. The reason we're interested in root cause is in part because of some of the more socio-technical and psychological impacts of believing that there's a single cause for any of these failures in complex systems. And because oftentimes that single cause is a human, and we blame and pin these things on people, which can create ultimately kind of unsafe environments for them as operators, where they don't feel like they can admit to their mistakes, and you can't really be open and transparent about happening with system. Whole bunch of detail in the report about that, and I wish I could get into it more here, but trying to stay on time. So the one other thing I wanted to talk about, the other result that is hopefully going to give you a little hope if us telling you MTTR isn't great ruins your day or your week, is this one. So we also went and looked at how many people are studying what we consider to be a near miss. So something happened, but it didn't have like a public, impact, for example. So we're studying near misses and whether people are looking at them because of what we'd seen happen in the aviation industry in the 90s. The US, sort of plane companies, flight companies had a pretty terrible safety record. And enough so that it was becoming a crisis, both, for them and in the public's sort of faith in their services. And they basically banded together a bunch of airline execs, unionized pilots, eventually like air traffic controllers and even regulatory bodies kind of got involved and all decided that we have to share what's happening in our own private little spaces because, a rising tide lifts all boats, a rising tide lifts all planes. You get what I'm saying. So studying near misses really helped the airline industry improve their safety and built a safety culture. And we're not doing that. at least we're not writing it up and publicly sharing that with other organizations so that we can all sort of learn from those almost incidents, because those almost incidents, they have so much richer information about what we call your socio-technical systems, right? Like the interfaces between you and the people, and the production pressures you have, and, you know, potential breakdowns in communication, cultural and political forces, things that, you know, happen at every single organization, have an impact on how our systems perform. And when something doesn't quite go bad, that gives you that chance to see where it works, and then you can invest in those types of things. And I know we're almost on the time here, but so near misses are a really great secret ingredient. If you're worried about other, you know, maybe you're not going to look at MTTR, or maybe you're going to put that to the side for a little while, go and study where those successes are, because you're going to find some really rich veins of information there. So I just kind of wrote this up here as what we consider these kinds of resilient organizations as doing: treating incidents as opportunities to learn, favoring in-depth analysis over what we call shallow metrics like MTTR, viewing humans as solutions and not problems, and studying what goes right in your near misses along with what goes wrong. And I will leave the last slide to James, because he's so good at this one.
Yeah, and well, and I hope that people can see why there's you know, when you overlap that Venn diagram of availability, reliability, security, you know, there's a lot of stuff here that I hope people find interesting. You can get the report at thevoid.community/report. You can find incidents just on thevoid.community. I think we're up to 18, I can't remember the last, we're just under 2,000. So help us get there. And then there's also opportunities to become members or partners of the Void. If your organization cares about this kind of stuff, we'd love to chat with you about it. But we're really excited about it, and we're seeing where the Void report in the spring goes. And yeah, thank you. I think we might have some time for questions if we want, or you know, Courtney, as you're kind of going through this. Well, let's see. We got any questions?
Hey folks, thank you for this presentation. And I think for all of you, just write down this URL for the report. You should definitely be reading it. For now, there are no questions in the chat. That means that either everybody is already partying, or everybody it's so super clear, or they're just blown away by the talk. That's what I am.
Blown away.
They fell into the void.
Wait, were we the like pre-party talk? That was always like the scariest talk to have at all the other conferences I've been at.
Well, we have a few more talks to go. So
okay, all right.
We're not at the party yet.
We're not at the party yet by
Okay.
far now, because we got I think we have two more sessions after you. So we click this one away, so we have you all. Courtney and James, I want to thank you for this marvelous talk. And if you have any questions afterwards, or you see this in post-production, of course you can connect with both of them, either on the Slack channel or
Twitter, LinkedIn, smoke signals. I'm sure Courtney and James.
We're happy to that.
Every platform there is. But hopefully you jump into the Slack and have a conversation there. But thank you again, both of you, for such an awesome session.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you
All right,
so much.
folks. Thank you.